Living with my young mother-in-law seemed innocent at first, until one morning changed everything. My wife had just left for work, and I walked into the kitchen, half asleep, only to find Kelly in a robe, reaching for something on the top shelf. What happened next was something I never expected, and it almost destroyed my marriage. This story is not what you think, and trust me, you will not believe how it ends. Stay with me. I have to get this off my chest. When I got married at the age of 33, I never imagined I would end up in such a bizarre situation. My wife, Emily, is 9 years younger than me. A sweet, grounded woman who swept me off my feet at a friend's wedding. Life was great, except for one unexpected detail. We lived with her mother, Kelly. Kelly is not your typical mother-in-law. She is only in her early 40s with a figure that could easily turn heads and a confidence to match. She always walked around the house in a short robe or tight yoga pants, which made things awkward, but I told myself to keep it together. After all, Emily trusted me and I loved her. What could go wrong? One morning, Emily left early for work as usual. I heard faint laughter from the kitchen, Emily and Kelly chatting over their morning coffee. I rolled over and stayed in bed, enjoying the rare peace of having 3 days off work. By the time I finally woke up, Emily was gone. I dragged myself to the kitchen, starving. Kelly was there, washing dishes in that robe she always wore, tied just loosely enough to make me avoid looking too long. When she saw me, she smiled and asked, "Tea or coffee?" Before I could answer, I noticed her struggling to reach a tea box on the top shelf. She stood on her tiptoes, her robe lifting just enough to make me freeze in place. Without thinking, I got up and walked over. I reached for the tea box but pressed too close to her. Too close. Kelly turned slightly, her eyes meeting mine. There was something in her expression. Surprise, confusion, and maybe curiosity. That was the moment everything started to unravel. I should have stepped back. I should have grabbed the tea box and walked away. But I did not. My hand brushed against Kelly's waist as I reached up, and instead of pulling away, I froze. The warmth of the moment hung between us like a charged wire, impossible to ignore. "Arthur," she said softly, her voice trembling just enough to break my trance. "What are you doing?" I felt my breath hitch. My rational mind screamed at me to back off, to apologize, to stop this before it spiraled out of control. But my body did not listen. My hands lingered on her waist, and for a split second, I thought I saw her lean ever so slightly toward me. Then she gently pushed me back, her expression hardening. "We cannot do this," she said firmly, tightening the belt of her robe. "Emily trusts both of us. Do not ruin this." The shame hit me like a freight train. I mumbled a quick apology and turned away, grabbing the tea box and slamming it on the counter. My heart pounded as I stumbled back to my bedroom, locking the door behind me. What had I done? What would Kelly do now? Would she tell Emily? For the rest of the day, I could not think straight. Kelly acted like nothing had happened. She hummed while cleaning the living room, made lunch for both of us, and even cracked a joke about how lazy I was being on my day off. But the tension in the air was suffocating. Every glance she gave me felt loaded. Every smile felt like a test. I told myself it was over. Nothing had actually happened. We could move past it. But later that evening, when Emily came home, Kelly shot me a look I could not decipher, half warning, half something else. My wife noticed nothing, happily chatting about her day and suggesting we order takeout for dinner. I thought I had dodged a bullet. I was wrong. The next few days were a balancing act. I avoided being alone with Kelly at all costs. Every time Emily left for work, I made up excuses to leave the house. Errands, gym visits, anything to avoid facing her. Kelly, to her credit, never brought up that morning. She acted as though it never happened, but her casual attitude only made me more paranoid. Then it happened. Late one night, as Emily and I were winding down after dinner, she looked at me with a frown. "Arthur, is everything okay?" she asked. "You have been acting weird all week. Did something happen at work?" I forced a laugh, trying to play it off. "No, just tired," I said. "You know how it is." She nodded slowly, but I could see doubt in her eyes. Emily was not one to push, but I knew she could sense something was wrong. That night, as she slept soundly next to me, I stared at the ceiling, wondering how long I could keep this charade going. The breaking point came a week later. I returned home early from running errands to find Kelly on the phone in the living room. She did not notice me at first, and I heard enough to make my stomach drop. I know it was a mistake, but he looked at me like, "No, I am not saying anything to Emily. She would never forgive either of us," Kelly said, pacing with the phone pressed to her ear. I stepped into the room, and she froze mid-sentence. Her face turned pale as she quickly ended the call. "Arthur," she said, her voice sharp and trembling. "You were not supposed to hear that." My heart raced. "What are you planning to do, Kelly?" I asked, my voice low but firm. She shook her head, her eyes wide with panic. "Nothing, I swear. This stays between us. I was just venting, that is all." But it was not just venting, and we both knew it. The weight of what had almost happened between us was pressing down harder every day, threatening to crack the fragile facade of normalcy. That evening, when Emily came home, she noticed the tension immediately. "What is going on with you two?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "You both look like you have seen a ghost." Kelly and I exchanged a quick, panicked glance, but neither of us said a word. Emily crossed her arms, waiting for an answer. Emily's stare bore into both of us. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Kelly looked down at her hands, fidgeting nervously, while my mind raced for something, anything, to defuse the situation. "Emily, you are imagining things?" I blurted out, forcing a laugh. "Kelly and I just had a disagreement about groceries." Emily's expression hardened. "Groceries? That is the best you could come up with? You are both acting so weird lately, and I want to know why." Kelly shot me a quick glance, her face pale. I could see the cracks forming in her resolve. She stood up abruptly, brushing her hands on her jeans. "I am going to bed," she announced, her voice shaky. "Good night, you two." Emily grabbed my arm before I could follow Kelly's lead. "Arthur, you are staying right here," she said firmly. "What is going on?" I could not keep it together any longer. The stress, the guilt, the constant fear, it all came rushing out in a flood. "Emily," I began, my voice trembling. "There was a moment, a stupid, fleeting moment. It was nothing, but it should not have happened." Her eyes widened, confusion and anger flashing across her face. "What do you mean, a moment? With who?" I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. Then, before I could answer, Kelly reappeared in the doorway. "Emily, stop," she said, her voice stronger now. "It was with me." The room fell silent. Emily stared at her mother, then at me, her face a mask of disbelief. "What the hell are you both talking about?" she demanded, her voice rising. Kelly took a deep breath. "It was a mistake. Nothing happened, but there was tension. It was inappropriate, and I am sorry. Truly sorry." Emily's face twisted in fury. "Tension? Between my husband and my mother? Are you kidding me right now?" She turned to me, her voice shaking. "Arthur, is this true?" I nodded, my heart sinking as I saw the betrayal in her eyes. "It was nothing, Emily, I swear. I was stupid, and I regret it more than you can imagine." Emily let out a bitter laugh. "Nothing? You both stood there and made a choice to keep this from me. Do you even realize how disgusting this is?" Kelly stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "Emily, please. I never wanted to hurt you. It will never happen again, I promise." Emily held up a hand to silence her. "I need time to think," she said coldly. "Both of you, stay away from me for now." She stormed out of the room, slamming the bedroom door behind her. Kelly and I stood there in stunned silence, the weight of our actions crashing down on us. The next few days were a nightmare. Emily barely spoke to either of us. She went about her routines like a ghost, her eyes hollow and red from crying. The house, once filled with warmth and laughter, felt like a prison where every passing moment was steeped in tension. I knew I had destroyed something precious. My guilt gnawed at me like a disease, But no apology felt big enough. No words strong enough to fix what I had broken. Kelly tried to reach out to Emily several times, but each attempt was met with icy silence or a sharp, "Leave me alone." On the third night, Emily finally confronted me. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, her face pale but composed. "Arthur," she said, her voice calm but devoid of warmth, "I need the truth. How far did it go? Do not lie to me." "It did not go far," I said quickly. "There was nothing physical, Emily. It was just a stupid moment where I forgot myself. I swear, I would never betray you like that." She studied my face, her eyes searching for any sign of deceit. "And my mother?" she asked, her tone cutting. "She stopped it," I admitted. "She told me it was wrong, and that we needed to move on. She regrets it just as much as I do." Emily nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "You are both pathetic," she said quietly. "But at least you told me the truth." The following morning, Emily packed a suitcase and left. She did not say where she was going, only that she needed space to think. I felt a mix of despair and relief. Relief that she had not made any final decisions yet, and despair knowing I might have lost her for good. Kelly and I barely spoke after Emily left. She spent most of her time in her room, and I avoided her like the plague. The weight of what we had done hung heavy in the air, an unspoken reminder of how easily trust could be shattered. 2 weeks later, Emily returned, but she was not alone. She brought her older brother, Jack, a man who had always been protective of her. He walked into the apartment like a storm, his jaw clenched and his eyes blazing. "You are a disgrace, Arthur," he spat, standing inches from my face. "You are lucky Emily asked me not to hit you, but do not think for a second I will let this slide." "Jack, please," Kelly began, but he cut her off with a glare. I cannot even look at," he said coldly. "How could you do this to your own daughter?" Emily stepped forward, her voice calm but filled with resolve. "Enough, Jack. I need to handle this myself." Jack reluctantly backed off, his fists still clenched. Emily turned to me, her expression unreadable. "Arthur, I am giving you one chance to fix this," she said. "One. But you are going to therapy and you are moving out. I need to rebuild trust, and that will take time, if it is even possible." I nodded, overwhelmed with gratitude that she was even willing to consider giving me a chance. "I will do whatever it takes, Emily," I said. "I swear." Kelly tried to speak to her after that, but Emily cut her off. "I am not ready to forgive you," she said coldly. "And I do not know if I ever will. You need to accept that." Kelly nodded silently, tears streaming down her face. The next few months were grueling. I moved into a small apartment nearby and started therapy, just as Emily had insisted. We attended a few sessions together, but she kept her distance otherwise. Kelly moved out of the apartment entirely, choosing to stay with a friend for a while. Emily and I worked on rebuilding what we had lost. It was not easy, and there were days when it felt impossible. But over time, small cracks of hope began to form in the wall between us. As for Kelly, our relationship never recovered. Emily maintained a strained, distant connection with her mother, but I stayed out of it completely. Some mistakes, I learned, leave scars that never fully heal. Looking back, I knew I had come dangerously close to losing everything. But I also knew that Emily's willingness to fight for our marriage was a gift I would never take for granted again.